"Ma, do we have to go?" 5-year-old Arisha asked innocently as her mother, Sadhna, hastily combed her hair in front of the mirror. For a brief moment, Sadhna's eyes fell on her own reflection. Her dull, tired skin and dry, unruly hair stared back at her. At 43, she looked older than her years. She took a deep breath. Once celebrated in her circle as the most attractive girl, she had been worn down by time and the relentless demands of single motherhood. The truth was, Sadhna's life had been nothing short of tragic since her husband's untimely death, leaving her alone to raise their 2 daughters. But this week brought a glimmer of relief. Her mother, who lived in Chikmagalur, had unexpectedly offered to host her grandchildren for a couple of weeks during their winter vacation. Sadhna and her mother had never been close. Their relationship had soured further when Sadhna moved to Bangalore for college and work, and they had rarely spoken since. Even after Sadhna became a mother, her own mother had shown little interest in her grandchildren. However, with age catching up to her, she seemed to realize the loneliness that awaited her if she didn't repair her strained relationship with her widowed daughter. As a first step, she insisted on hosting the children. This unexpected gesture was a pleasant surprise for Sadhna, who had been struggling to find time for herself. While many of her friends explored Tinder and Bumble, she had never worked up the courage to try online dating. But with 2 child-free weeks ahead, the prospect of meeting someone new stirred a cautious sense of excitement within her. "Mom, tell Na, do we have to go?" Arisha's persistent voice broke through Sadhna's thoughts. She looked at her younger daughter and smiled. "You're going to have so much fun with Nani Grandma, Aru. Did you know she has a huge garden in her backyard? And her house is right next to a forest. Imagine all the animals you'll get to see." Sadhna feigned excitement, her tone lighting up for Arisha's sake. The little girl's eyes sparkled at the mention of animals. "Will there be rabbits, Mom?" "Of course, Beta. There will be plenty of them," Sadhna reassured her. Then, with a touch of urgency, she added, "Akka, now go fetch your sister. Tell her Mom said she needs to be ready in 5 minutes." 5 minutes? Little Arisha shouted as she ran down the corridor to her elder sister Ramesha's room in their small 2-bedroom apartment, her excitement echoing through the walls. Left alone, Sadhna sighed and picked up her phone. She opened the Bumble app she had downloaded days ago but hadn't dared to explore until now. She began filling out her profile, starting with a couple of pictures from an office event a few weeks ago where she had dressed up and worn makeup for the first time in months. When the app prompted her to write a bio, Sadhna quickly typed, "First timer here, be kind. Living the Bangalore life with a love for good coffee, weekend tracks, and indie music. Swipe right if you believe life gets better with age and." She paused, rereading the paragraph. Her finger hovered over the screen. "Maybe I'll just have fun with the first few," she murmured to herself, then slyly deleted the word single mom. "Mom, tell her to leave me alone, I'm ready," came an exasperated yell from Ramesha, her 13-year-old, jolting Sadhna out of her brief moment of solitude. Sadhna shook her head and put the phone aside. That was her cue to get moving. "One more day," she told herself, brushing away her hesitation. "Stay right there. I'm coming," she shouted to the kids, tossing her phone on the bed before heading to their room. As she walked away, she heard her phone buzzing repeatedly. Her Bumble profile was active. It was nearly sunset when Sadhna arrived at her mother's house on the outskirts of Chikmagalur. The plan was straightforward: drive for hours to Chikmagalur, drop the kids off at her mother's house, and head back the same day. Sadhna had already informed her mother that she needed to be at work the next morning, a convenient excuse to avoid staying longer. The ranch-style farmhouse looked exactly as Sadhna remembered from her teenage years when her family had moved to the quiet town. Returning after so many years brought an unexpected wave of nostalgia. She looked around, taking in the forest that bordered the property. The sounds of crickets and rustling insects filled the air, punctuating the stillness. Her gaze shifted to a large banyan tree in the distance. Her throat tightened. A sinking feeling crept over her, cold and unrelenting. Almost instinctively, she closed her eyes, willing the unease to pass. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Arisha's small voice broke through her thoughts. Sadhna blinked, startled back to reality. Ramesha had already bolted out of the car to greet her grandmother, who was slowly making her way toward them. Arisha, still seated, was watching her mother with wide, concerned eyes. "Nothing, Beta. Just some dust in my eyes," Sadhna lied, forcing a smile. Arisha climbed into her lap, gently pried her mother's eye open with her tiny fingers, and began blowing air into it. "Is this better, Mama?" she asked earnestly. Sadhna nodded, her heart heavy with guilt. She kissed Arisha on the forehead, feeling her resolve begin to falter. "Bitu, come inside. What are you two doing?" Her mother called out from a distance, using Sadhna's childhood nickname. Sadhna straightened. Emma, let's make this quick. I have to get going, she shouted back. Her mother nodded but said nothing. For a fleeting moment, Sadhna thought she saw a softness in her mother's expression, but the formality in her own voice pushed them back to the familiar distance. The awkwardness between them was palpable, even to the children. It had been 8 days since Sadhna's trip to Chikmagalur. For the first few days, she missed her daughters terribly, calling them every few hours. But from what she observed, they seemed to be adjusting well. Arisha had already spotted a couple of rabbits and a cat. Ramisha was happily learning to cook with her grandmother and had even resumed journaling, a habit she had picked up earlier that year after Sadhna encouraged her with YouTube tutorials on journaling techniques. Seeing her daughter take such an interest in writing made Sadhna proud. The girls appeared to be thriving in the greenery and open air of the countryside. Sadhna was relieved that her mother's coldness toward them had finally thawed. But when it came to her own relationship with her mother, that was another story, one she preferred not to dwell on. As the days passed, Sadhna finally mustered the courage to meet her first Bumble date. The experience felt like a throwback to her carefree late 20s when she approached dating and life with a sense of fun and spontaneity. She let herself go, indulging in alcohol and smoking for the first time in years, and ended up spending the night at her date's house. That one date turned into a routine. Over the next 6 days, she went on for more dates. One of those mornings, she was even too hungover to go to work and had to call in sick. Finally, Sadhna felt alive, untethered from the weight of her responsibilities. But on the 8th day, everything changed. It was nearly 4:45 a.m., and Sadhna had just returned from her 5th date's house after a night of karaoke and drinking. The sudden ringing of her phone startled her. It was her mother's landline number. "Hello, Emma," she answered groggily. "Mom." Ramisha's voice came through, soft and trembling, barely above a whisper. "Ramisha." "Veda, what happened?" Sadhna asked, her heart sinking. There was a brief silence on the line. "Nani's being strange," Ramisha whispered again, her tone cautious, as though she were waiting for the right moment to speak. Sadhna sat up, her heart beginning to race. "Rami, why are you up so early?" "What do you mean, strange, Mom? Just listen," Ramisha whispered, her voice barely audible. "I want to come back home. I'm scared, Mom." Her voice cracked into a sob, and the line went dead. Sadhna stared at the phone, stunned. A few moments passed as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. Ramisha is only 13, she reminded herself. She's probably just homesick and missing her friends. Her phone vibrated again. This time, it was a notification from Bumble, her 133rd match. The rush of attention and the ego boost it provided had become an addictive distraction, something she wasn't ready to give up so easily. A sleep-deprived and exhausted Sadhna sighed. "I'll call my mother later," she decided, brushing aside the nagging feeling in her chest. At around 10:30 a.m., Sadhna stepped out of her office and walked to the side of the road to call her mother's cell phone. No one answered. Frustrated, she tried the landline next. To her surprise, her mother answered within seconds.
"Sadhna!" Her mother's voice echoed with a mix of concern and exhaustion. "Where are you? You need to come here now. There's something wrong with Ramisha. I don't know how to explain it, but she keeps talking about things that don't make sense. She says she's seen something in the house, something strange." Sadhna's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, Emma? Is she sick? I'm coming right now." Without waiting for her mother's response, Sadhna hung up and hurriedly grabbed her things. Her mind raced as she drove back to Chikmagalur, the quiet road stretching out in front of her like an endless ribbon of uncertainty. What had happened to Ramisha? What was it that her daughter had seen? The unease she had felt the moment she stepped foot into her mother's house now felt like a premonition. Sadhna arrived at her mother's house close to noon, her mind still tangled with questions. When she pulled into the driveway, she saw Ramisha standing at the front door. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear, as if she had seen something no child should ever have to witness. "Mom, please." Ramisha's voice was shaky as she ran towards Sadhna. "I don't want to stay here anymore. I'm scared. Nani is acting weird, and there's something in the house. Something I don't understand. It's watching us." Sadhna knelt down to her daughter's level, cupping her face in her hands. "What do you mean, Ramisha? What's going on?" "I don't know," Ramisha whispered, her eyes darting nervously to the windows. "It's like there's something in the walls. I hear it at night. It sounds like whispers, and sometimes I can see things moving in the corners of the room." Sadhna felt a chill creep down her spine. The rational part of her mind tried to dismiss it, but the look in her daughter's eyes, the terror in them, couldn't be ignored. Something was very wrong here. "Mom, I'm telling you, it's real," Ramisha insisted, her voice barely a whisper now, as if speaking too loudly might summon whatever was haunting the house. Please, we need to leave. Sadhna glanced toward the house, her mother nowhere in sight. Where's Emma? She's in the garden, but she won't listen to me. She says everything is fine, Ramisha replied, still shaking. Against her better judgment, Sadhna decided to go inside and speak to her mother. When she entered the house, the temperature seemed to drop, the air thick with a strange stillness. It was as though the house itself was holding its breath. She found her mother sitting on the couch in the living room, staring vacantly at the wall, her expression distant. Ma, what's going on? Ramisha's scared, and you're not taking her seriously. Sadhna's voice cracked with frustration. Her mother looked up slowly, her eyes clouded and unfocused. It's just her imagination, Sadhna. There's nothing to worry about. But Sadhna could sense something was off. Her mother's voice was hollow, like she wasn't fully present. You're not acting like yourself.
What's happening here? Before her mother could respond, Ramisha rushed into the room, her face pale and trembling. Mom, I heard it again. It's in the walls. There's something there. She cried, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Sadhna rushed to her daughter, pulling her into an embrace. It's okay, baby. We're leaving, all right? We're going home. But as she turned to leave, her mother suddenly stood up, blocking the doorway. You can't leave. You have to stay. It's not safe out there. It's not safe anywhere. Sadhna's heart pounded in her chest. Something was terribly wrong. Her mother had never been like this. Was it the house? The isolation? Or was something deeper at play? Sadhna stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of her mother's words sinking in. What are you talking about, Ma? What's not safe? Her mother's face twisted into an eerie smile, her eyes now gleaming with something unsettling. It's too late. You should have left long ago. The house is calling you, Sadhna. It's always been waiting for you. Sadhna recoiled, the blood draining from her face. What was happening to her mother? And what did she mean by the house calling her? Ramisha clung to Sadhna, whispering, Mom, please, let's just go. I can't stay here anymore. For the first time in a long while, Sadhna felt a deep, unshakable fear creeping over her. She knew she had to leave, but something in her gut told her that whatever was happening here had only just begun. With her daughter in tow, Sadhna turned to leave, her heart pounding with fear. But as she stepped toward the door, a voice echoed through the house, low, guttural, and unrecognizable. You can't escape me, Sadhna. Sadhna froze, her breath caught in her throat. Ramisha clung to her mother tighter, sobbing. Please, Mom, let's go. Ramisha pleaded, her voice barely audible as the air seemed to thicken with the sound of something creeping up behind them. In that moment, Sadhna realized that they weren't alone in the house. Someone was watching them. The feeling of being trapped was overwhelming. As she turned to face her mother one last time, she saw that her expression had changed again. Her eyes were wide, filled with an unholy light. You should have stayed away, her mother whispered, her voice barely human. You were always meant to be here. Sadhna felt her knees give way. Something wasn't right, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to get her daughter out of that house before it consumed them both. The air seemed to crackle with tension as Sadhna bolted for the door, dragging Ramisha along with her. As they stepped outside, the oppressive feeling lifted slightly, but the fear remained. The truth was, she didn't know if they were truly safe now. All she knew was that something had followed them out of the house. Something ancient. Something dark.
As they got into the car and drove away, Sadhna couldn't shake the feeling that the house and its presence wasn't done with them yet. It was only a matter of time before it would come back for them.